So I was saying, if you're new to painting, I was just going to show you a couple things that you might want, or if you're old to paint, if you're watching, I'm going to show you anyway. What I have over here is actually, I have the brush, which if I did not cut that part out of the video, you would have saw me using it. I really don't use a brush too much when I'm doing walls. Usually I only use brushes when I'm doing furniture, and well, it's usually a different type of brush than the synthetic like this. But for the most part, like little areas, and there really aren't that many, like the edger usually gets not only in the cracks and corners, but and usually you don't really even have to tape off. It's just I usually do that just so I can have a little bit more freedom. It's just easier for me to just take a little bit of time, tape off, and then it's just kind of like a free-for-all. I don't really have to pay too much attention to getting outside the lines, and I definitely don't want to have to repaint this trim because for the most part it's in decent enough tack that, I mean, if I have to repaint it, that's fine, but I prefer just to move on to another project without having to do something that didn't need to be done. Even in this area over here, I got most of that done with the edger. Now up here, the edger was too thick, so I did have to use the brush in there, and that's more than likely why I have a couple of spots of paint, not near as much as I have on the baseboard. Like pretty much every area that I've painted, even though I taped off, I basically taped off so that I could get in the edges, but I forgot about the fact that usually, well, this would be the first time that I was working on a flooring project at the same time, so I didn't have to, I had the luxury of not having to use a drop cloth to cover up the flooring, so I just left it off completely. But usually what I'll do is I will take the tape and tape the to the bottom of the tape. I'll tape it over the drop cloth and extend it over the flooring so it doesn't get damaged when I'm painting. And I didn't do that this time because there was no flooring, and I was just trying to protect the edges so I could get a clean line. And it looks like for the most part I'm going to have to go over all of the baseboards in white paint, which that's okay because I actually have white paint, and that's, I'm gonna say that's not exactly why I use it, because I usually tape off, but it is for touch-ups, which that's another good thing to have on hand is white paint, if assuming that your areas that aren't being painted or that you don't want to paint are white. That way, at least by the time you finish your project, I'm not saying you have to have it like I do at the very beginning of the project, but for the most part, I like to assume that when I start a project, I'm not gonna ever, you know, have to go back to the store for that same project. If I go back to buy something else, I'm gonna buy it for a new project. So I try to have everything on hand and never take for granted I can just go back to the store, because that's never really my intention. I like to kind of get everything for one project in one stop and get it over with. I'm really happy with the way that the paint turned out. Everything looks pretty smooth. I could live with it. Like I said, some of the things that look like streaks are basically just some of the spots I went over that are waiting to dry, and this is pretty exciting. So basically, yeah, I've looked over it once, and now you've looked over it with me, and I think it's pretty much confirmed that I can just do this last section and then I'll be done with everything. Right now, what I'm gonna do is, I think I went ahead and dumped the rest of that paint back into the container, and it's kind of hard to tell with the glare, but I can tell looking down into this that I have about, I'd say at least a third of the paint left in here, and that's definitely, I don't want to jinx it or anything, but I'm going to say that's most definitely going to be enough to cover that one tiny section. And I'm just going to put the lid back on it and take a break. if you've heard me mention that a few times, I know that this is a project, and maybe, you know, one of the things, you know, when I'm going over the different supplies that you might want to have, and showing you just the different things that I have, which I have knee pads here. They're actually for a different project, but they're for the flooring that I've mentioned. But it's not necessarily a bad, anytime you know, with the bottom layers of the wall, you may have to crawl, or, I mean, it depends on how into it you are. If you have you know, like I said, you could connect the pole to the end of the tool that I was using, which I don't right there. If you really don't want to get down on your knees, which I understand, everybody, some people have knee problems or whatever, or you just don't want to get knee problems, and you can connect the pole to the end of this right here. And then if you use a pole, any hard to reach spots, like I said, you don't have to get on the ladder, which definitely, if you have bad knees, you know, I know that the stepping motion is one thing you try to avoid. And also, you don't have to crawl down on the floor to get those edges. I feel like I would still need to, because like I said, I'm a perfectionist, but if you're trying to get it done and you don't want to, then you can become a perfectionist using the pole, and that's very likely. But with all else fails, if you do have bad knees or knee problems, or you just want to prevent getting knee problems, you can still use those knee pads to get those areas down lower. You always want to have something like this, and there are a lot of things that could substitute as a hammer. I have all kinds of things all over the place that can be substituted as a hammer, but that is mainly one, if you forget you have any nails in the wall or anything, or if you have to remove pictures before you paint, which you certainly would want to. Of course, as we all know, the back of the hammer's for that. Then also, to put the lid back on the can, you can, a lot of times you can press it firmly and get it back on securely. But yeah, if you're not just coming back to it within the same day, you might want to make sure it's a little bit more secure, especially if there's a chance that it's gonna fall onto the floor or something. You definitely don't want it to be even the least bit open. And this little container, I actually have a big gallon of it in my craft room, but I actually have paint thinner in that. Usually that's used to remove oil-based paint and things like that. You don't really need it with latex, but it works. Paint thinner, actually, you can clean a lot of things with it. So if I'm using oil-based, definitely, if I'm afraid it's going to get onto the floor or something like that, you know, I definitely want to have it on hand to go ahead and use it. You know, because the longer it sits, the harder it's going to be to get out. And if I have to go get it, I may not go ahead and do that right away. So then, you know, then it's really going to be a problem. Of course, I got the painter's tape. And when I mentioned before that there's other things that can substitute as a hammer, this is one of those things. The bottom of this, it's a multi-use scraper, and I have a couple of them around here. I think I got another one just to make sure, because with this painting project and the combination of that and the flooring, I definitely was going to need a scraper for both. So like I said, I don't like to go back to the store, so I got that right away while I was there. The back of that can be used as a hammer. So then just some other things I have over here. Of course, like I said, I have my beverages, because you don't want to become dehydrated. It's, you know, it's air conditioned in here, but still, when you're doing things, or you're climbing up and down a ladder, or, you know, any kind of physical activity, you definitely don't want to become dehydrated, and have that on hand. Some air freshener and wipes to clean your hands, and this is a cleaning solution. Actually has my company name on it, because it's a combination of some ingredients that I like to use and I figured out were the best for cleaning. And that's pretty much it. So like I said, I'm gonna take a break now, and when I come back, I will finish this last section of the room, and then it'll all be done.